"Where did you hide the $50,000, you thief?" The words from my daughter Jessica sliced through the dining room like a rusty knife, cutting not just the air, but the last few threads holding my heart together. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening my soul. It was a Sunday afternoon at our house in Pasadena, California. The aroma of pot roast floated from the kitchen, a scent I'd always associated with family celebrations. The warm, golden walls reflected the late afternoon sun filtering through the large craftsman windows, creating the kind of warmth I had cultivated over 32 years of marriage. My name is Susan Harrison. I'm 58 years old, and until that cursed Sunday, I believed I had built a family as solid as the granite of the San Gabriel Mountains where I grew up. I was wearing my navy blue dress, the one my husband Leo always said made me look elegant. My hands, the same hands that had baked thousands of cookies, wiped away countless tears, and worked tirelessly, trembled as I poured sweet iced tea into the crystal glasses I inherited from my mother. The table was set perfectly, as always. A linen tablecloth, our wedding china, and in the center, a bouquet of sunflowers I'd bought that morning at the farmer's market. It was our monthly family dinner, that sacred tradition I had religiously maintained for decades, where the whole Harrison family gathered to strengthen the bonds I thought made us unbreakable. My 2 daughters were there. Jessica, 34, always impeccable in her tailored pantsuit and perfectly styled hair. She worked at an advertising agency and had a way of speaking that peppered conversations with business jargon, as if to prove she was more sophisticated than the rest of us. And Emily, 2 years younger, quieter, dressed in her brown cardigan and worn-out jeans. She was a public school teacher in East LA, with dark circles that never seemed to fade, and a sadness that clung to her since her divorce 3 years ago. The grandkids were running around the backyard. Sam, Jessica's 8-year-old son, was chasing butterflies among the geraniums, and Sophie, Emily's 6-year-old daughter, was playing with her doll on the swing Leo had hung from the old oak tree. Everything seemed normal. Everything was a perfectly orchestrated lie. Leo, my 63-year-old husband, sat at the head of the table like the patriarch he'd always been. His gray hair was combed back, his white shirt starched, and he wore that serious expression he'd adopted in recent months, as if carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. Ever since he retired from the IRS, something in him had changed. He no longer sought me out in the morning for coffee, no longer told me about his day, no longer looked at me the way he used to. "Mom, this is delicious as always," Jessica said, but her voice sounded hollow, like a birthday wish you give out of obligation. I smiled, the kind of smile I had perfected over the years, the one that hid my exhaustion, my doubts, my growing loneliness. Because yes, I felt lonely, terribly lonely in my own home, surrounded by the family for whom I had sacrificed everything. As I collected the empty bowls from the tomato soup, which had been simmering since 5 in the morning because I knew it was everyone's favorite, Emily avoided my gaze. Her hands nervously fiddled with her cloth napkin, and every time I tried to start a conversation with her, she'd glance away toward the kids playing in the yard. "How are the finances, Dad?" Jessica asked suddenly, with that calculated tone she used in her work presentations. The fork slipped from my grasp and clattered against the plate, the metallic sound echoing in the silence that followed her question. Something in her tone put me on edge. "Fine, honey. Everything's in order," Leo replied, but his eyes didn't meet mine. In order? Or in order for some people? That's when I knew something terrible was about to happen. The air grew thick, like it does before a summer thunderstorm. The children continued to play outside, oblivious to the tragedy about to explode in the dining room where we had celebrated so many birthdays, graduations, and holidays. Jessica stood up, and for the first time, I noticed she had a manila folder in her purse. She pulled it out with deliberate movements, like a lawyer presenting evidence in a courtroom. "Mom, we need to talk about the $50,000 Dad transferred to us 3 months ago." My heart stopped. I literally felt as if someone had flipped a switch, and all the blood in my body had ceased to flow. "What are you talking about, Jessica? Don't play dumb." Her voice rose. and the children stopped playing in the yard. Dad told us he transferred $50,000 to each of us so we could be independent, so we'd have our own money. My eyes shot to Leo, searching for an explanation, a denial, anything to tell me my daughter had misunderstood. But he was staring at his plate as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. "Leo?" My voice came out as a broken whisper. "And you know what's funny, Mom?" Jessica continued, ignoring my confusion. "I never received my money. But according to the bank, the transfer was made. To the joint account that you manage." The world tilted. The golden walls began to spin, and the smell of the roast became nauseating. I gripped the edge of the table, feeling my legs turn to jelly. "Jessica, I don't know what you're talking about. Your father never said anything to me about— Where did you hide the $50,000, you thief?" The scream echoed throughout the house. The plates trembled. The children ran inside, frightened. And I felt as if my soul had been ripped from my body. Emily still didn't look up, but now she was crying silently, tears falling onto her brown cardigan like raindrops on dry earth. In that moment, I knew my life, as I had known it, was over forever. Jessica's accusation continued to ring in my ears as I stood there, hands trembling, clutching the edge of the table. The children had run to us, their eyes wide with fear, not understanding why their grandmother was being yelled at like that. "Take the children out to the garden," I murmured with what little voice I had left. Emily finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen, and took Sam and Sophie by the hand, leading them to the backyard, their little voices asking, "Why is Aunt Jessica yelling?" and "Why is Grandma crying?" faded with the distance. I sank into my chair slowly, like a 90-year-old woman, though I was barely 58. My legs wouldn't support me anymore. The manila folder was still on the table, like a snake waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Okay. Explain this to me slowly," I said, trying to remain calm. "When did your father supposedly make these transfers?" Leo's gaze remained fixed on his plate, as if he'd found the answer to the universe's mysteries in the leftover mashed potatoes. His hands, the hands that had caressed my face thousands of times, were now clasped on the table, tense as fists ready for a fight. Jessica opened the folder and pulled out papers that looked like they came straight from the bank. She placed them in front of me with the drama of someone revealing a state secret. "Here are the statements, Mom. Date, March 15th. 2 transfers of $50,000 each. One in my name, one in Emily's. But look at this." She pointed with her perfectly manicured nail at a line on the document. "The transfer to my account was rejected because there was an issue with my account. And guess where it ended up? Back in the joint account that you manage." I took the papers with hands that no longer fully obeyed me. The numbers danced before my eyes, mocking me. It was all there. Date, amounts, account numbers. All real, all documented, and I knew absolutely nothing about it. "Leo," my voice sounded firmer than I felt. "Is this true?" For the first time all day, my husband looked up. His eyes, the brown eyes that had been my refuge for over 3 decades, now looked at me with a mixture of guilt and something that shattered my soul. Annoyance. As if I were a nuisance to be tolerated. "Yes, it's true, Susan. I decided to give them their inheritance while I was still alive. Money so they could have some financial independence. And why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd make a big deal out of it. You always make a drama out of money." Those words hit me harder than any slap. Drama? I made a drama? I, who had worked double shifts at the garment factory in downtown LA for 10 years to pay for my daughter's college tuition. I, who sold my grandmother's gold locket, the only heirloom I had, to pay for Emily's braces when she was 15. I, who sewed clothes at night to earn extra cash and never, ever, questioned him about his spending. I stood up from the table, feeling as if I'd aged 100 years in 5 minutes. I walked to the kitchen, where the pot roast was still simmering on low heat in the slow cooker my mother-in-law gave me on my wedding day. The steam rising from it was the only warm thing in the entire house. My memories began to flood my mind like water from a broken dam. I remembered when Jessica was 8 and got pneumonia. I spent 3 weeks sleeping in a chair at the county hospital, surviving on coffee and vending machine sandwiches, spending all our savings on antibiotics and tests. Leo was so busy with work, he barely showed up in the evenings. I remembered when Emily wanted to get her teaching credential and needed money for books and supplies. I worked cleaning offices on weekends for 2 years to pay for her studies, while Leo said it was an unnecessary expense because women just get married and don't need a career. I remembered the sleepless nights sewing costumes for school plays, baking cakes for bake sales, organizing holiday parties where I bought all the supplies and cooked for 20 families, never receiving financial help from anyone. I remembered when my mother died 10 years ago, and I needed money for the funeral. I asked Leo to help with the costs, and he told me to use my money, as if our accounts were separate, as if I hadn't contributed to building everything we had. Mom? Emily's voice pulled me from my thoughts. The kids want to go. They're scared. I turned and saw her standing in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes avoided mine, as if I were guilty of something terrible, as if I had really stolen that money. Do you also think I'm a thief, Emily? I don't know what to believe, Mom. A lot of strange things have been happening lately. Strange things like what? Like you having money saved up that you never told us about. Like Dad having to make transfers behind your back. Like you controlling all the accounts, but we never really know how much money there is. Each word was a nail driving into my chest. My youngest daughter, who had been my kitchen companion, who helped me bake pies every Thanksgiving, who cried on my shoulder when her husband left her, now saw me as a dangerous stranger. I returned to the dining room where Jessica had spread more papers across the table. Bank statements, transfer confirmations, account summaries, a complete investigation into my supposed guilt. Look, Mom, here are all the transactions from the last 6 months. Transfers you never told us about. Large cash withdrawals. What was all that cash for? I sat down and looked at the papers. Indeed, there were large withdrawals. But I knew exactly what they were for. The roof repair after the September rains, $5,000. My sister Rose's cataract surgery, another $3,000. The loan I gave Emily when her ex-husband stopped paying child support for Sophie, $2,500 she had never paid back. All of that money is accounted for, Jessica. Really? And why didn't you ever tell us? Why are you always so secretive? They aren't secrets. I just didn't know I had to report every dollar I spend from my own money. It's not your money. It's family money. Money that Dad earned working 30 years for the government and that you've been managing however you please. There it was. The truth that had been growing like a silent tumor in my marriage for years. To them, I had never worked. My shifts at the factory, my late-night sewing jobs, my weekends cleaning offices, none of it counted as real work. I was just the administrator of the money he earned, the unpaid secretary of the family finances. Leo stood up from the table and walked toward his study without a word. I watched him go, his shoulders slightly slumped, his gait slower than usual. 32 years of marriage walking out the door without looking back. This is over, Mom, Jessica said, gathering her papers. Either you tell us where my money is or we're going to have to take legal action. Legal action? Are you threatening me? I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing. They all left. Jessica with her manila folder and her absolute certainty of my guilt. Emily dragging Sophie, who was crying because she hadn't been able to say goodbye to her grandma. The dirty dishes remained on the table, silent witnesses to the last family dinner we would ever share. I was left alone in my house, surrounded by the echoes of accusations, with the scent of the pot roast turning sour in the air, and the terrible certainty that everything I had built was crumbling like a sandcastle in the rain. The days that followed were a silent hell. Leo and I lived in the same house, but it was as if we inhabited different planets. He would leave early before I woke up and come back late, after I had already retreated to our room with the excuse of a headache that was becoming more real each day. The phone calls had stopped completely. Before, Jessica would call me every few days to tell me about Sam, about her work, about anything. Emily used to spend Sundays with me, and we'd watch Sophie play in the garden while we drank coffee and ate pastries from Mrs. Carmen's bakery down the street. Now, the phone remained as silent as a tombstone. The first sign that something bigger was brewing came on a Wednesday afternoon. I was watering my geraniums in the yard when I heard my cell phone ring from the kitchen. I ran, with the foolish hope that it was one of my daughters, that they had come to their senses, that they were calling to apologize and clear up this whole misunderstanding. It was Sam, my 8-year-old grandson. "Grandma?" His little voice sounded confused, sad. "Sam, my love, how are you, sweetie?" "Grandma, my mommy says I can't come over on Saturdays anymore because you're sick." My breath caught in my throat. Saturdays with Sam had been my sacred ritual for 5 years. He'd arrive at 9 in the morning with his little backpack full of toys, and we would make chocolate chip pancakes, watch cartoons, play Monopoly, and in the afternoon, I'd teach him how to make figures out of Play-Doh to take home. "Sick? That's what your mommy told you?" "Yeah, she says you're very sick and that it's contagious." "But Grandma, I want to see you. I made a drawing for you at school. It's of us making pancakes." Tears began to stream down my cheeks like silent waterfalls. My own daughter was using my grandson as a weapon, keeping him from me with cruel lies. "Sam, my love, Grandma is fine. I'm not sick. Tell your mommy that." The call disconnected. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. I dialed Jessica's cell, and after 5 rings she answered with that cold voice she'd adopted since that cursed Sunday. "What do you want, Mom? Why did you tell Sam I'm sick?" "Because you are sick. Mentally sick. A woman who steals from her own family is not right in the head." "I didn't steal anything, Jessica. Until my money shows up, Sam will not be exposed to your toxic influence." She hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone as if it were a ticking bomb. The word toxic echoed in my head like a malevolent specter. I, who had dedicated my entire life to caring for, nurturing, and protecting my family, was now considered toxic. That same week, it was my 59th birthday, a day we had always celebrated in a big way, with a barbecue, music, and the whole family gathered in the backyard. This time, I woke up alone. Leo had left before dawn, leaving only a note on the kitchen table. "Left early. There's coffee in the pot." Not a happy birthday, not a kiss, not even the courtesy you'd give a stranger. I made myself breakfast, scrambled eggs with toast, just how I like them, and sat at the dining room table where, days before, I had been accused of being a thief. I chewed slowly, savoring each bite as if it were my last meal, because in a way, it felt like it was. The phone didn't ring all day. Not Jessica, not Emily, not the grandkids, not the neighbors who always called to wish me well. It was as if I had been erased from the world, as if I had never existed. In the evening, I put on my favorite dress, a yellow one with embroidered flowers that had cost me 3 months of savings, and went for a walk through the tree-lined streets of Pasadena. I passed the house where I was born, now a coffee shop for tourists. I walked by the market where my mother used to take me as a child to buy spices, and where now the vendors greeted me with that forced smile you save for people you no longer like but have to tolerate out of politeness. Did they already know? Had Jessica been telling everyone her mother was a thief? I walked all the way to St. Andrew's Church, where Leo and I had gotten married 32 years ago. The doors were open for the 7 o'clock mass, and I went inside without thinking. I'm not very religious, but something pulled me to seek refuge in that place where I had once been happy. I sat in the last pew, the same one my mother used to sit in, and for the first time in days, I let the tears flow freely. I cried for the lost years, for the unappreciated sacrifices, for the love that had turned to suspicion, for the loneliness that now lived in my chest like a permanent resident. An elderly woman came and sat next to me. I didn't know her, but she had the kind face of a neighborhood grandmother who knows when someone needs company. "Are you all right, dear? I don't know if I'll ever be all right again. Family troubles?" I nodded, unable to speak. "Children can sometimes break our hearts more than any stranger," she said with the wisdom of someone who had lived a long life. "But God doesn't give us burdens heavier than we can bear. I don't know if I can bear this." "Yes, you can. Because you're here. Because you're still breathing. Because you're still fighting. That's already a lot." I returned home after dark. The house was completely silent. Leo hadn't come back, or if he had, he'd locked himself in his study as he had been doing all week. I poured myself a glass of the red wine I saved for special occasions and sat in the backyard, under the starry Southern California sky. The city lights created an orange glow that dimmed the stars, but a few managed to shine through anyway, just like I would have to. The next day, I decided it was time to find answers on my own. I took the bus downtown to the bank, where we'd had all our accounts for over 20 years. The same bank where I had faithfully gone every 2 weeks to deposit my paycheck from the factory, where I had taken out loans for family emergencies, where they knew my name and my story. The manager, Ms. Peterson, greeted me with her usual professional cordiality, but I noticed something different in her eyes, as if she already knew why I was there. "Mrs. Harrison, how can we help you? I need to review all the transactions on our accounts from the last 6 months, especially the transfers made in March. Of course, I'll just need your husband to be present, as he is the primary account holder. But I have access too. I've always managed these accounts." "Yes, Mrs. Harrison, but to review large transactions, we need authorization from the primary account holder." Primary account holder. After 20 years of depositing my money into those accounts, I was still secondary. An attached signature. A conditional authorization. Can I at least find out if there were transfers made in my daughter's names in March? Ms. Peterson checked her computer, typing with the precision of someone who had done this thousands of times. "Yes, ma'am. On March 15th, 2 transfers of $50,000 each were initiated. One was rejected due to an issue with the destination account and was returned to your checking account. The other one was processed successfully. To which name was the successful one processed? I can't give you that information without authorization from the primary account holder." I returned home more confused than ever. One transfer had gone through, the other had bounced. But which was which? And why hadn't Leo told me any of this? That night, when he finally came home around 11, I confronted him. "Leo, I went to the bank. I need you to explain exactly what happened with those transfers." He looked at me with exhaustion, as if I were a problem he no longer had the energy to solve. "Susan, I already told you. I gave the girls some money. End of story. But how much did each one get? Why did one transfer bounce? I don't know the details. Go and ask them tomorrow. They won't talk to me. They've blocked my number. Your older daughter is accusing me of being a thief, and your younger daughter acts like I'm a ghost." "Well, you must have done something to make them act like that. I must have done something. After 32 years of marriage, after sacrificing everything for this family, my husband's conclusion was that I must have done something to deserve this treatment." I went to bed that night feeling my world fall apart piece by piece, like a puzzle someone had thrown into the air just to see where the pieces would land. And the worst part was, I was starting to doubt myself. Had I really done something wrong? Was it possible I had moved money and didn't remember? Was I losing my mind? For the first time in my life, I fell asleep wondering if the problem was, in fact, me. The answer came in the most unexpected way, as life-changing truths often do. It was Friday morning, and I was in the garden pruning the rose bushes that had overgrown the fence when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone. For the past 2 weeks, our house had become a silent fortress where no one entered and from which I barely left. When I opened the door, I found Sophie, my 6-year-old granddaughter, standing there in her school uniform and her frozen backpack, her eyes full of tears and her lower lip trembling like it did right before a tantrum. "Sophie, what are you doing here, sweetie? Where's your mom?" "Mommy's at work and she doesn't know I'm here," she said with the brutal honesty only children possess. "I got off the school bus 3 blocks early. I told the driver my grandma was going to pick me up." My heart raced. Emily would kill me when she found out her daughter had come to my house without permission. But at the same time, I felt a joy so pure it made my chest ache. My granddaughter had sought me out. She had chosen me. "Why did you come, my love?" "Because I want to talk to you, Grandma. Mommy and Aunt Jessica say mean things about you, but I know it's not true. You've never done anything bad to me." I took her by the hand and led her to the kitchen, where I made her a glass of chocolate milk and warmed up some cheese toast I'd made the night before. Seeing her there, sitting in the high chair where she'd had breakfast hundreds of times, filled me with a painful nostalgia. "What kind of things are they saying about Grandma, Sophie? That you're bad. That you stole money from Aunt Jessica. That's why we can't come see you anymore." Every word was a stab, but I needed to know how far the poison had spread. "And what do you think?" "I think they're crazy," she said with the certainty of a 50-year-old woman. You never ask us for money. You're always giving us candy, buying us toys, making us yummy food. How can you be a thief if you're always giving things away? The simple, irrefutable logic of a 6-year-old made me cry right there in front of her. I cried because my own granddaughter understood what my adult daughters refused to see. Grandma, why are you crying? Because I'm very sad, my love. The people I love most in the world think I did something very bad, and I don't know how to prove to them it's not true. Sophie climbed down from her chair and came to hug me with that desperate strength children use to try and fix the adult world. I believe you, Grandma, and I'm going to help you. How are you going to help me, sweetie? With this, she said, reaching into her little backpack and pulling out a smartphone I immediately recognized. It was Emily's old phone, one she no longer used but kept as a backup, and that Sophie had borrowed to play with when visiting her mom. Look, Grandma, it's all here. I didn't understand what she was showing me until she swiped the screen with the dexterity of a generation born knowing how to use technology. She showed me the mobile banking app. Mommy always leaves her app open when she checks her money. And I saw something weird the other day. My heart began to pound so hard I thought Sophie could hear it. With trembling hands, I took the phone and looked at what she was showing me. There it was, in Emily's savings account. A deposit for $50,000, dated March 15th, the exact same day as the supposed transfers. Emily had received her money, and she hadn't said a word. The blood in my veins turned to ice. For 3 weeks, I had endured accusations, humiliation, my family's contempt, and doubt about my own sanity. And it turned out my younger daughter, the one who looked at me with the eyes of a victim, the one who played innocent while her sister screamed thief at me, had the money all along. Sophie, does your mommy know you saw this? No, Grandma, but I noticed it when I was looking at her phone. There's a lot of money in there. More money than I've ever seen. My hands were shaking as I took screenshots with Emily's phone. The evidence was there, clear and irrefutable. My daughter had allowed me to be emotionally tortured, knowing all along that she had her money. Why didn't Mommy say anything if she has her money? Sophie asked with an innocence that cut like a razor. I don't know, my love. Sometimes adults do very foolish things. But I knew with a clarity that broke my soul. Emily had seen an opportunity to destroy the relationship between Jessica and me, to position herself as the good daughter, the silent victim suffering the consequences of the problems between her wicked sister and her thieving mother. While her sister yelled and accused me, while I was emotionally bleeding out, Emily remained silent, knowing she had the power to end this entire nightmare with a single sentence. I received my money. Grandma, can you take me back home? If Mommy finds out I came here alone, she's going to be really mad. Of course, my love. The drive to Emily's house was the longest of my life. Every red light, every turn, every passing minute gave me more time to process the magnitude of the betrayal. It wasn't just that Emily had received the money and kept quiet. It was that she had used my suffering for her own emotional gain. For years, since her divorce, Emily had competed with Jessica for my attention. Jessica had a successful husband, a brilliant son, a professional career. Emily had a painful divorce, financial problems, and the constant feeling that life had been unfair to her. This situation had given her the perfect opportunity to be the victim, the daughter suffering in silence while her mean sister attacked her poor, innocent mother. It had given her the spotlight, compassion, and above all, my total devotion, as I tried to shield her from the conflict with her sister. We arrived at her home, a small apartment in a complex in Boyle Heights that I had helped furnish when she separated from her husband. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my throat. Emily opened the door, and her face changed completely when she saw me standing there with her daughter. What is Sophie doing with you? How did she get to your house? She got off the school bus and walked to my house, I said with a calmness I didn't feel. We need to talk, Emily. I have nothing to talk to you about, Mom. I already told you that. You received the $50,000 on March 15th. The color drained from her face. Her eyes darted nervously between my face and her daughter's, who was watching us with childish curiosity, not understanding the gravity of the moment. I don't know what you're talking about. Emily, I have the screenshots from your bank account. I know you received the money. What I don't know is why you let your sister treat me the way she did, knowing you had your share all along. Sophie, go to your room, she ordered in a strained voice. But Mommy, I said go to your room. Sophie ran off, frightened by her mother's tone. We were left alone at the door, two women who had shared more tears than laughter in recent years, facing a truth that stood like a concrete wall between us. Why, Emily? Why would you do this to me? Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage, of frustration, of the anger of being caught. Because it's always been this way, Mom. Always Jessica first. Jessica the successful one, Jessica who married well, Jessica who gives you perfect grandkids. And what about me, right? I'm the failure, the divorcee, the one living in a low-income apartment. That's not true, Emily. I have always loved you both equally. Liar! She screamed with a force I didn't know she had. When Jessica needed money for her wedding, you came up with $10,000. When I got divorced and needed help, you told me you had nothing. When she wanted to get her master's degree, you found a way to support her. When I wanted to take professional development courses, there was no money. Each accusation hit me like a slap. It was true that at different times I had been able to help one more than the other, but it had always been due to circumstances, not preference. Emily, the circumstances were different. When Jessica got married, your father had a better job. When you got divorced, we were going through financial difficulties. It was never about preference. Well, now I have money, and for the first time in my life, I'm the one who gets to decide whether to share it or not. And you know what, Mom? I decided Jessica can go to hell. Let her learn what it feels like to need something and not have it. But you used me. You let me suffer for 3 weeks knowing you could have ended it all. I let you experience what I've lived my whole life, being the one to blame for everything, the one who always messes up, the one everyone points their finger at. I looked into her eyes, and for the first time in my life, I saw my younger daughter as she truly was. Not the silent victim I thought I was protecting, but a woman filled with a resentment that had been waiting for the perfect moment to collect on all the emotional debts she believed we owed her. Don't look for me again, Mom. And don't use my daughter to spy on me again. She slammed the door in my face, leaving me standing in the hallway of that building where I had carried furniture, cleaned when she was sick, and comforted her tears as a recent divorcee. I drove home on autopilot, my mind processing a truth that hurt more than all the accusations of the past few weeks. My 2 daughters hated me, one for something I hadn't done, and the other for everything I had. That night, when Leo got home, I showed him the screenshots without saying a word. He looked them over in silence with that impenetrable expression he had perfected over years of working for the government. So, what are you going to do now? He asked me. Tell Jessica the truth. Show her the proof. And what's that going to change? Emily will get angrier. Jessica will feel like an idiot. And you'll still be the bad guy because you're the one who exposed the deceit. Would you prefer I continue to be seen as a thief? I'd prefer you keep this family together. That night I realized I was completely alone in my own life. My daughters hated me for different but equally painful reasons. And my husband would rather I carry the blame for others than face a truth that might shatter the fragile harmony of his world. I spent that entire night sleepless, sitting on the living room sofa with the printed screenshots in my hands, staring at them over and over as if they were evidence of a crime that had taken decades to solve. The house was utterly silent. Leo had shut himself in his study after our conversation, and the only sound breaking the stillness was the ticking of the wall clock I had inherited from my grandmother. At 6 in the morning, as the first rays of sun began to filter through the lace curtains, I made a decision that would change everything. I was not going to carry anyone else's blame. I showered, put on my sky blue dress, the one that always gave me courage in difficult times, and left the house before Leo woke up. I had an appointment I had been waiting 3 weeks for. Jessica's office was in Century City, in one of those glass corporate buildings that reflect the clouds like giant mirrors. I had never visited her at work. I had always respected her professional space, but these were extraordinary circumstances. The receptionist looked at me with the professional smile reserved for unscheduled visitors. Good morning. How can I help you? I'm here to see Jessica Harrison. I'm her mother. Do you have an appointment? No, but But it's urgent. Let me see if she can see you. I waited for 10 minutes on one of those leather sofas that looked more expensive than all the furniture in my living room. Through the 23rd floor windows, I could see all of Los Angeles stretching out like a concrete ocean under the morning smog. Ms. Harrison says she's in a very important meeting and cannot see you without an appointment. Of course. My own daughter was denying me 5 minutes of her time. Tell her I have the evidence she needs to find her $50,000. The receptionist relayed the message, and this time the response was different. She says to come up to her office. Jessica received me from behind a desk that looked like a barricade, dressed in a gray suit that made her look more serious than I remembered. The walls were decorated with diplomas and professional awards, photos with important clients, advertising prizes. A whole life built far from the Pasadena house where she had grown up. You have 5 minutes, Mom. What's so urgent? Without a word, I placed the screenshots on her desk. Jessica took them and examined them with the same concentration she gave to important contracts. I watched her expression change gradually from impatience to confusion, from confusion to disbelief, and finally to a contained fury I knew all too well. Emily received her money back in March, the same day the transfers were supposedly made. And why didn't she say anything? Why did she let me accuse you of— Her voice trailed off as the weight of the situation began to hit her. Because she wanted us to fight. Because she wanted to see me suffer. Because she believes that all these years, I've loved you more than her. Jessica got up from her chair and walked to the window, turning her back to me. Her shoulders tensed as if she were carrying an invisible weight. How long have you known this? Since yesterday. Sophie showed me her mother's phone. A 6-year-old girl had to solve what we, 2 adult women, couldn't handle in 3 weeks. She turned around, and for the first time in weeks, I could see my real daughter behind the professional mask. Her eyes were red, not from tears, but from the exhaustion of someone who has been carrying too heavy an emotional load. Mom, I don't know what to say. You can start by apologizing for calling me a thief in front of the whole family. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. But something had changed in me during those 3 weeks of hell. Jessica's apology came too late to completely heal the wounds her accusations had left. Do you know what hurts the most, Jessica? It's not that you doubted me. It's that you chose to believe your sister without even giving me a chance to explain. It's that you preferred to humiliate me in front of everyone rather than talk to me in private. I was angry, Mom. So angry. I needed that money for what, Jessica? Did you need it so urgently that you couldn't wait even a week to investigate before destroying me? For the first time since she was a teenager, I saw my eldest daughter cry in front of me. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration. I needed it because Robert lost his job 2 months ago. Because we have debts we can't pay. Because Sam's tuition is due next week and we don't have the money to pay for it. Are you happy? Now you know why I was so desperate? The information hit me like a bucket of cold water. My daughter, who had always boasted about her financial stability, her perfect life, her successful marriage, was going through serious financial problems and had never told me anything. Why didn't you tell me you needed help? For what? So you could give me lectures on saving? So you could ask me what we spend our money on? I preferred to handle it myself. Or you preferred to accuse me of being a thief, rather than admit you needed help from your mother. That wasn't my intention. It all just spiraled out of control. When Dad told me he'd given us money and I hadn't received it, I thought something strange had happened. And it didn't occur to you to ask me directly before putting on that show in front of the whole family? It doesn't matter now, Mom. What's done is done. The important thing is that now we know the truth. But that was the problem. For Jessica, knowing the truth automatically erased all the damage she had caused. As if an apology were a magic eraser that could wipe away 3 weeks of humiliation, loneliness, and pain. And what are you going to do about your sister? I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to demand she explain why she did this. And then we'll figure out how to fix this as a family. Family. That word, which had been my religion for 58 years, now sounded hollow, like an echo in an empty house. No, Jessica. No what? I'm not going to keep fixing your emotional messes. I'm not going to be the rope in the tug-of-war between you and your sister. I'm not going to keep sacrificing my peace of mind to maintain family harmony. My daughter looked at me as if I had grown a second head. "What are you saying, Mom?" "I'm saying enough is enough. For 58 years, I have put everyone's needs before my own. I have carried others' guilt, absorbed the emotional blows of the entire family. I've been the one who always gives in, who always forgives, who always turns the other cheek." I stood up from the chair with a determination I hadn't felt in decades. "Your sister used me as a scapegoat for her resentment. You publicly humiliated me without investigating. Your father would rather I carry someone else's blame than face conflict. And I am not going to allow it anymore." "Mom, you're being so dramatic. Everyone makes mistakes." "Dramatic? Feeling like a criminal in my own family for 3 weeks is being dramatic?" I walked out of that office with my legs shaking but with a clearer head than I'd had in years. For the first time in my life, I had set boundaries. For the first time, I had said enough, and meant it. I rode the elevator down alongside executives in expensive suits checking their phones, oblivious to the emotional earthquake that had just rocked my world. When I stepped out onto the street, the Los Angeles air felt different, as if its chemical composition had changed. I got into the first taxi I saw and gave an address I hadn't uttered in years. The bank where I had my personal account, the one I had opened with my first paycheck from the factory and had always maintained with my own savings. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison." The bank officer who had known me for over a decade greeted me. "How can I help you?" "I want to close the joint account I have with my husband and transfer my half to my personal account." "Are you sure? That's a pretty significant change." I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I signed all the necessary papers with a steady hand. For the first time in 32 years of marriage, my money would be mine alone. My financial decisions would be mine alone. My life would be mine alone. When I left the bank, I sat on a bench in the park across the street and called my old job. It had been years since I'd worked outside the home, but I had kept in touch with some of the women from the garment factory where I had worked before I got married. "Mrs. Harrison? What a surprise to hear from you." It was the voice of Carol, who had been my supervisor. "Carol, do you know if there are any positions available? I need to go back to work." "Well, we were just needing someone with experience for the afternoon shift. Would you really be willing to come back?" "More than willing. I need to." That evening, I arrived home with employment contracts in my purse and a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it wasn't the crushing sadness that had been my constant companion for the past weeks either. It was something new. It was freedom. Leo was already home when I arrived, sitting on the sofa watching the news as if nothing had changed in the universe. "Where have you been all day?" "Working on my new life." I told him everything. The confrontation with Jessica, the closing of the joint account, the new job. He listened in silence, with that neutral expression he had perfected over years of marriage. "Don't you think you're overreacting a little, Susan?" "You know what I think is an overreaction, Leo. 32 years of sacrificing my identity for a family that sees me as an object of convenience. That I think is an overreaction." That night, I slept alone in our marital bed while Leo stayed on the living room sofa. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have nightmares. For the first time in years, I woke up feeling like the owner of my own destiny. My new job at the garment factory started the following Monday, and for the first time in decades, I woke up with a purpose that had nothing to do with serving others. The sound of the alarm clock at 5:30 in the morning was like music to my ears, because it meant my time belonged to me again. Leo left the house early that morning without a goodbye, and I got ready in silence, choosing comfortable clothes for work, shoes that wouldn't hurt after 8 hours on my feet, and for the first time in years, I didn't worry about leaving a meal prepared for when he returned. The factory was exactly as I remembered it. The constant hum of the machines, the smell of dye and cotton, the hardworking women arriving on time to earn their day's pay with their own hands. Carol greeted me with a sincere hug, the kind I hadn't received in my own home in months. "Mrs. Harrison, it's so good to have you back. You look different, more, what's the word? Stronger." "I feel different, Carol. Like I've woken up from a very long nightmare." Working those 8 hours reminded me of who I was before I became Leo's wife, Jessica and Emily's mother, the grandmother who existed only to serve. There, operating the overlock machine as I had for 10 years in my youth, I remembered I had skilled hands, a quick mind, and a resilience I had forgotten I possessed. The other women told me about their lives as we worked. Rosa, who had raised 4 children alone after her husband abandoned them. Patricia, who returned to work at 50 when her husband got sick. Guadalupe, who had never married and lived happily in a small condo she had bought with her own savings. "So, why did you come back, Mrs. Harrison?" Rosa asked me during our break. "I thought you were retired, enjoying your family." Turns out enjoying my family wasn't as pleasant as I thought. They all laughed, the knowing laughter of women who understand the complications of family life without needing explanations. I came home that evening with $100 in my pocket, my first paycheck in years, and a sense of satisfaction I had forgotten existed. But the peace was short-lived. Waiting for me on the kitchen table was an official summons from the family court. Jessica and Emily had jointly sued me for fraudulent management of family assets. I read the document 3 times before I could fully process it. My own daughters, after knowing the truth, after Jessica's apology, after everything we had discovered, had decided to take the matter to court. Leo arrived an hour later and found the document on the table. "Did you know about this?" I asked, pointing to the legal papers. "Jessica called me this morning. She said they had decided to resolve it legally so that everything would be clear." "Legally? We already know Emily had her money all along." "Apparently, Emily is now saying you manipulated her into keeping quiet so you could get Jessica's money. That you used insider knowledge of the family accounts to benefit yourself." I laughed. A bitter laugh. The kind that comes out when the pain is so deep it borders on madness. So now I manipulated Emily into staying quiet while Jessica screamed that I was a thief? That's what she's claiming. And what do you think, Leo? After 32 years of marriage, do you also believe I'm capable of something like that? My husband looked at me with those brown eyes that had once made me feel like the most loved woman in the world, and what I saw there finally broke my heart. I don't know what to believe, Susan. So many strange things have happened. So much missing money, so much confusion. Sometimes I think there are things about you I never really knew. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, drinking chamomile tea and processing the magnitude of what was happening. My 2 daughters had achieved what had probably been their plan all along, to cast me as the villain of their family story, to justify years of accumulated resentment. The next day after work, I went to see Mr. Martinez, a neighborhood lawyer who had helped several neighbors with family problems. His office was small and modest, but he had a reputation for honesty that contrasted with the expensive lawyers my daughters had likely hired. "Mrs. Harrison, I've reviewed your case. It's complicated, but not impossible. What we need to do is prove that you had no knowledge of or participation in the handling of those transfers. I have the screenshots that prove Emily received her money. That's excellent. But they'll argue that you knew everything from the beginning and manipulated the situation in your favor. We need more evidence." I spent the next week gathering every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence of my financial management over the last few years. Medical bills from when I helped my sister, invoices for the house repairs, records of the interest-free loans I'd given Emily. On Wednesday of that week, Sophie showed up at my door again. This time she was with Sam, my 8-year-old grandson. "Grandma, Mom says we can't see you anymore because there are legal problems," Sam told me with a seriousness that no child his age should possess. "And that's why you came to see me?" "We came because we don't understand why adults have to make things so complicated," Sophie said with a maturity that broke my heart. I sat them down in the kitchen and made them some cheese toast while they told me what they'd overheard at home. The phone calls between their mothers, the visits from lawyers, the late-night arguments between their parents. "Aunt Jessica says you're mean, but Mommy says Aunt Jessica has always been the favorite, and Dad says they're both crazy," Sam recounted with the brutal honesty of childhood. "And what do you two think?" "We think the grown-ups are very confused," Sophie said. "But we know you, Grandma. You give us love, you take care of us, you teach us things. Why would we stop seeing you because of money?" The court summons was for Friday of the following week. That morning, I woke up early, put on my best black dress, and headed to the courthouse with my folder full of evidence and a sense of calm that surprised even me. Jessica and Emily were there with their respective lawyers, sitting on opposite sides of the room as if they were enemies instead of sisters. Leo sat in the back row, exactly in the middle, as if he didn't want to take sides. The judge, a man in his 60s with a face that had seen every possible family tragedy, reviewed the documents while we remained silent. All right, ladies. We have a rather peculiar case here. A family tearing itself apart over $50,000 that, as I understand it, never actually went missing, went. I presented my evidence, one piece at a time. The screenshots of Emily's account, the receipts for my family expenses, the records of all the interest-free loans I'd provided, the invoices for all the money I had invested in solving family problems. Emily's lawyer argued that I had psychologically manipulated his client to keep her quiet while I benefited from the confusion. Jessica's lawyer argued that I had used my position as the family's financial manager to misappropriate funds. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and, for the first time in my life, I told the whole truth without a filter, without worrying about hurting feelings or keeping the peace. Your Honor, I didn't manipulate anyone. For 32 years, I have been the one who solves this family's financial problems. I've lent money without charging interest, paid for emergencies out of my own pocket, and worked double shifts to cover family expenses. And when a problem finally arose that I didn't cause, my own daughters chose to accuse me before even looking for the truth. And what do you propose as a solution, Mrs. Harrison? That each of them takes responsibility for her own life, that Emily admits she received her money and lied for weeks, that Jessica apologizes for the public accusations she made without basis, and that we all learn that money cannot be more important than human dignity. The judge ruled that there was no evidence of fraud or misappropriation. He ordered each party to pay their own legal fees and recommended family therapy. But as we walked out of the courthouse, I knew no amount of therapy could repair what had been broken. Emily left without a word. Jessica approached me, her eyes filled with tears. Mom, we can fix this. We can be a family again. I looked at her for a long moment, memorizing her face, because I knew it would be one of the last times I would see her as my daughter, and not as a stranger who had hurt me deeply. Not anymore, Jessica. Some things can't be fixed. Some words can't be erased. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Are you going to punish us forever? I'm not punishing you. I'm freeing you, and I'm freeing myself. That afternoon, when I got home, I found Leo's suitcases in the living room. I'm going to stay with my brother for a while, he said without looking me in the eye. This has all become too complicated for me. Of course it has, I replied with a calm that astonished me. 32 years of marriage is very complicated when it comes to defending your wife. Susan, it's not that. Of course it's that, Leo. When you had to choose between comfort and justice, you chose comfort. When you had to choose between a false peace and the truth, you chose the false peace. When you had to choose between your daughters and your wife, you chose not to choose. He left that night, and for the first time in decades, I was completely alone in the house that had been my home. But strangely, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. The first few days alone in the house were like learning to walk again. I had lived for so long according to the schedules, needs, and moods of others that I couldn't remember what it felt like to wake up without the obligation to serve someone else. The first morning, I got up at 6 out of habit, but instead of making breakfast for Leo, I made a cup of coffee and sat on the patio to watch the sunrise. The colors of the sky over Pasadena, orange, pink, gold, seemed more vibrant than ever, as if I had been seeing life through a gray filter that had finally been removed. At the factory, my coworkers began to notice the change. You look different, Susan, Brenda said to me during lunch. Like you've gotten 10 years younger. I feel different, Brenda. Like I can finally take a deep breath. And your family? Did you sort things out? My family decided I was the problem. So I removed myself from the equation. And it turns out there's no problem anymore. The women laughed with the knowing complicity of those who understand that sometimes the most radical solution is also the most liberating. Work had become more than just a source of income. It had become my space for healing. There, amid the noise of the machines and the camaraderie of strong women, I rediscovered skills I had forgotten I had. My hands remembered the precision of difficult seams, my mind sharpened with production calculations, and my body reacclimated to the rhythm of honest work. On my first payday, I received my full paycheck, $1,200, and that money felt different from any amount I had ever handled before. It was mine, completely mine, earned with my own effort, with no need to explain to anyone how I would spend it. With part of that money, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I bought myself new clothes. Not clothes to impress anyone, not clothes to meet family expectations, but clothes that I liked. A turquoise blouse that made my eyes pop, a pair of jeans that fit perfectly, comfortable but pretty shoes. "You look very elegant, Susan," Mrs. Carmen, the baker, told me when I stopped by her shop. "Is there a special occasion?" "Yes, there is, Mrs. Carmen. I'm celebrating that I no longer have to ask anyone for permission to exist." One Saturday morning, 2 weeks after Leo left, I was watering my plants when I heard familiar voices on the street. It was Sam and Sophie, arguing about the best route to get to my house without their mothers finding out. "Did you two sneak out again?" I asked when they appeared at my door. "We didn't sneak out, Grandma. We told our moms we were going to the park to play soccer," Sam said with the crushing logic of an 8-year-old. "Technically, we didn't lie, because your house is on the way to the park," Sophie added with a mischievous grin. "I let them in and made them pancakes like in the old days. But this time, everything felt different. I was different. There wasn't that desperate urge to please them, to prove my love through food and care. I simply enjoyed their company, without emotional burdens, without guilt." "Grandma, is it true you don't live with Grandpa anymore?" Sam asked with the direct curiosity of childhood. "It's true, my love. And are you sad?" The question took me by surprise. For weeks I had been so busy surviving, working, defending myself, that I hadn't stopped to analyze what I truly felt. "You know what, Sam? I'm not sad. I'm peaceful." "My teacher says that when grown-ups separate, it's not the kid's fault," Sophie said seriously. "Your teacher is very wise. And it's not always the grown-up's fault either. Sometimes people just grow in different directions." "Did you grow in a different direction than Grandpa?" "Yes, sweetie. I grew toward freedom, and he stayed right where he's always been. After they left, promising to come back when they could, I kept thinking about that conversation, freedom. It was the first time I had used that word to describe my new life, and I realized it was exactly what I felt. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the movies alone. I chose a romantic comedy I knew Leo would have considered silly women stuff, bought a large popcorn and a soda, and enjoyed every minute of those 2 hours where no one interrupted me, no one needed me, no one judged me. After the movie, I walked through Old Town Pasadena. The brick-lined streets, the museums, the cafes full of tourists and young couples. I sat on a bench in the main square and watched life pass by. Families strolling, artists selling their work, musicians playing on street corners. An elderly couple walked by hand in hand, laughing at something only they knew. For a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia for what my marriage could have been, but the feeling passed quickly. I couldn't miss something that had never really existed. "Susan?" A voice pulled me from my thoughts. It was Robert, Jessica's husband, standing in front of me with a look of surprise, and something that might have been shame. "Hello, Robert. Can I sit down?" I nodded, curious to know what the man who had been absent during the entire family conflict would have to say. "I wanted to apologize," he said bluntly, "for not defending you when Jessica accused you, for not looking into it before letting things get so out of hand. And why are you doing it now?" "Because I found out the whole truth about Emily, about the lies, about how they used you, and because I lost my job 3 months ago. And I've been so desperate that I understand why Jessica reacted the way she did. But that doesn't justify what you did. No, it doesn't. But it explains why we were all so on edge. Money makes people do terrible things. No, Robert, a lack of character makes people do terrible things. Money is just the excuse." He was quiet for a moment, watching the children playing in the fountain in the center of the square. "Jessica wants to talk to you. She's very sorry. We already talked. In her office and in court. But it's different now. Now she truly understands what happened. What did she understand, Robert? That she lost the best mother she could have ever had because of her own pride. That you sacrificed for years for her and for Sam. That when she finally needed to behave like an adult daughter, she chose to act like a spoiled child. His words moved me, but not enough to change my decision. Tell Jessica she can talk to me when she's ready for a conversation between adults. Not between a mother and daughter, but between two grown women who respect each other's boundaries. And what are your boundaries? That I will never again allow myself to be disrespected to keep the family peace. That I will never again carry someone else's blame. That I will never again put the emotional needs of others before my own dignity. Robert nodded slowly. You know what hurts the most, Susan? Sam asks about you every day, and I don't know what to tell him. Tell him the truth. Tell him his grandma learned to love herself. And sometimes that means making difficult decisions. Can I bring him to see you? He and Sophie are always welcome in my home. But have him come because he wants to spend time with me, not because I need to prove my love by buying him things or cooking him special meals. That night, when I got home from my day off, I found the house exactly as I had left it. Tidy, quiet, mine. I made a simple dinner for one, poured myself a glass of the wine I'd bought with my first paycheck, and sat on the patio to enjoy the tranquility. The phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Harrison? Yes. Who's this? This is Patricia, Sophie's principal. The little girl asked me to call you. My heart skipped a beat. Had something happened? Sophie is fine, the principal continued, as if reading my mind. But today she gave a presentation in class about the person I admire most. And she talked about you. It was so moving I wanted to share it with you. About me? Yes. She said she admires her grandma because she learned to be brave even when she wasn't young anymore. Because she chose the truth even though it hurt. And because she taught her that true love doesn't need to be proven all the time with gifts and sacrifices. I hung up the phone with tears in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of a deep joy, of the certainty that my decision to live with dignity was bearing fruit I hadn't even imagined. For the first time in months, I went to sleep smiling. I woke up with a light heart, as if a sack of stones had been lifted from my back. Maybe it was the dream where my mother was patiently brushing my hair in front of her bedroom mirror. Or maybe it was just that I'd finally slept soundly. I made coffee, and as the aroma filled the kitchen, seemingly opening the windows of my soul, I put my hands on the table and said quietly to myself, today, I'm not chasing after anyone. Whoever wants me in their life can walk alongside me. Mid-morning, there was a knock. I opened the door with my apron on, still warm from the kitchen. It was Jessica. Her face was bare, no makeup, and her voice had no armor. I came alone, she said. And I came to listen. She came in. I poured her a coffee. She sat in her usual chair. But she seemed different, smaller, less haughty. I didn't lecture her. I gave her silence, which is sometimes clearer than 1,000 scoldings. Then she spoke. She let out everything she had guarded like a shameful secret. The credit card debt, the overdue tuition, the wounded pride from Robert losing his job, and the fear. The fear of appearing fragile, of asking for help, of accepting that her perfect world was a house of cards. I accused you because I needed someone to blame, and you were there, solid, as always. I thought you could take the hit. I was cruel. I took a breath. I wanted to tell her everything that had hurt, but I chose something else. If your pride is more important than my dignity, I can't walk with you. If your truth comes before the truth, I can't do that either. She nodded, staring at the tablecloth as if the embroidered flowers held a map back home. From her purse, she pulled out a printed sheet of paper. It's a signed letter. I'm going to send it to the family group chat. It says, I admit I accused you without proof, that I was guided by anger and fear. And, she swallowed hard, I'm going to demand that Emily publicly state what she hid. I'm not demanding anything of her, I replied. Demand it of yourself. As for her, let her conscience decide. Before she left, she hugged me. It wasn't a quick hallway hug. It was a long one. Her chin on my shoulder, her breath trying to steady itself. We didn't cry. We had already cried too much. In the afternoon, I went to the factory. The new routine was putting my bones back in place. Carol handed me a bag. "A messenger dropped this off for you," said it was urgent. Inside was a letter from a lawyer's office, a request for my signature on the sale of marital property in Leo's name. The buyer, an LLC with an address in Beverly Hills. The price was well below market value. I understood immediately. Someone was trying to sell the house out from under me, fast and cheap. No one signs for me, I thought. I called Mr. Martinez. "Don't sign anything," he said. "First thing tomorrow, we'll file for an injunction to block the sale. The house is community property. Without your signature, no one can take it." I slept with the envelope on my nightstand. Not out of fear, but as a reminder that I no longer lived in the dark. The next morning, Mr. Martinez and I filed the motion. The civil court judge stamped a seal that sounded like a gavel of dignity. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright street. The crowds, the juice stands, the shouts of the newspaper vendor, it all felt like a celebration. Back home, I found Jessica's letter in the family group chat. Clear, unadorned, and Emily's immediate response. 3 paragraphs of pure fury. She manipulated Sophie. She hacked my accounts. She's a dangerous woman. I felt the old knot wanting to rise in my throat. I breathed. I wasn't getting in the ring. The one who did call was Leo. "What did you do at the courthouse?" His voice had that sharp edge I knew from long ago. "I protected what's mine. And I protected myself. You're overreacting. It was just a financial restructuring by a company in Beverly Hills that, what a surprise. You used to consult for when you were at the IRS. I knew from the tax ID on the document. Mr. Martinez had traced it in minutes. I'm not going to explain what I've already figured out." Silence. The silence of a man caught not in the trap, but in the act of setting it. "Susan," he finally said, "it got out of hand. This was supposed to benefit all of us. It might have benefited you, not me. At this stage of my life, I'd rather have a small, clean house than a big, mortgaged lie." We hung up. I felt a strange peace, the kind that only comes when doors are closed without being slammed. That afternoon, another knock. Emily, her eyes filled with war. "What did you say to Joe?" she blurted out without a greeting. "He called me asking about the deposit from March. My ex. Now I'm being humiliated all over East LA. I didn't say anything. Robert spoke with Jessica. "Maybe he—" "Of course. You're an expert at interfering without getting your hands dirty. You've hated me since I was born." I let her spit her venom for a long while. When her volume dropped, I spoke softly. "I have loved you since the moment I first held you, but I've decided to love you without letting you abuse me. If you want to talk like an adult, I'm here. If you've come to fight, you can leave. And Sophie, are you going to forbid me from bringing her here too? Sophie can come when you can respect this house. And when you learn how to apologize." She left, slamming the gate behind her. My legs trembled, but my pulse was steady. That night, while I was embroidering a tablecloth a client had ordered for her wedding, I received a voice message from Sam. "Grandma, I scored a goal. I want you to come to my game on Sunday." I closed my eyes. I didn't want to return to public scenes, but a new life also requires courage. On Sunday, I went to the soccer field in a park in Alhambra. The kids were like a flock of birds in a stampede. Sam saw me and raised his hand, happy. At the end, Jessica approached and gave me a kiss on the cheek. Behind her, Emily stood at a distance, watching like someone guarding a border. We said nothing. I left before the team photo. The first step had been taken, just being there, without explanations. Mr. Martinez moved quickly. With the injunction, the sale was frozen. Furthermore, he traced the LLC's movements. Coincidentally, its manager had been an intern under Leo at the IRS. Piece by piece, the puzzle revealed its picture. I wouldn't make a scene, but I wouldn't stay silent either. Decency isn't timidity, it's firmness. Midweek, Carol introduced me to some new clients, women who ran a sewing co-op in South Pasadena. They were looking for someone with fine motor skills to finish wedding dresses and fix impossible hems. I said yes. I saw myself coming home late, tired and satisfied, with the smell of new fabric in my hair, and I felt that my life finally had muscle. It was during this busy time that the final call came. Aunt Charlotte, Leo's older sister, was calling for a peacemaking lunch on Sunday at her home in San Marino. "You go if you want to, honey," she told me with her usual frankness. "But if you go with your head held high. Anyone who disrespects you will be shown the door." I went, for myself, for my grandkids, for the closure my story deserved. I arrived with an apple pie and my new turquoise blouse. In the backyard, there were long tables, the smell of barbecue and bay leaves. The cousins, the in-laws, the nieces and nephews, they had all heard a garbled half of the story. That's the problem with fire. It spreads faster than water. Charlotte started directly, like someone ripping off a bandage. "Nobody here makes accusations without proof. The judge has already had his say. Now, whoever has something to amend, do it while looking them in the eye, like a decent person." Jessica stood up first. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. "Mom, I apologized to you in private, and today I'm doing it in public. I accused you without proof. I humiliated you. I hurt you. There's no excuse. I'm going to repair what I can and keep my mouth shut where it doesn't belong." She walked over and hugged me. The crowd was silent. Then it was Emily, furious, compressed. She walked toward me with clenched fists. She got stuck. "I did receive the deposit in March. And yes, I kept quiet." A sharp silence. I liked that for once. Jessica felt smaller than me. I liked that. Her gaze broke. "I liked watching you run after me." She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. Are you asking for forgiveness?" Charlotte asked. "I'm sorry," she repeated, like someone who doesn't know how to cross a river. "I'll go to therapy." That. I didn't expect more. Sometimes one person's maximum effort is another's bare minimum. Leo spoke last. Instead of a defense, he had the clean-shaven face of someone who can no longer lie to himself. "I tried to sell the house. I was looking for liquidity to cover someone else's debt." "Someone else with a name?" Charlotte prodded. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence wrote what his shame could not pronounce. "You don't owe me money," I told him. "You owe me years of loyalty. Since I can't collect on that, I'll collect what the law recognizes. My half. The rest, you can settle with your conscience." No one applauded. It wasn't a performance. It was closure. That night, back in Pasadena, I put our wedding photos in a box. Not to throw them away, but to store them in the attic where you keep things that were once true but no longer are. I called Mr. Martinez. We would start divorce proceedings, uncontested. No war, no cursed inheritances, with a clear inventory and the house appraised at its true market value. He said it was a pleasure to work that way. Weeks later, we signed. The house would be sold at a fair price, and I would buy a sunny apartment in South Pasadena with a patio for my potted plants. I didn't want any more grand staircases or paintings that reminded me of anyone. I wanted morning sun and afternoon silence. I moved with 3 boxes, my fabrics, my sewing machine, and the tablecloth I was embroidering for the wedding client. Sophie and Sam helped me hang the planters, planted basil seeds, and drew a heart in chalk next to the door. Sue's house. Jessica arrived with a sturdy second-hand table. Robert fixed the leaky faucet. Emily didn't come. She sent a short text. "When I'm ready, I'll find you." I saved her dateless promise like you save seeds in a dry season. My first night in the apartment, I heard that clean silence again. I made a cup of tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and read a book I'd bought for myself without thinking if anyone else would like it. Before sleeping, I opened the balcony door. The reflection of the moon shattered into pieces on the water of a nearby fountain. I knew I was home, not because the house was mine, but because, for the first time, I was mine. Months passed. The sewing co-op grew. They entrusted me with hems that were like surgery, embroidery for baby layettes, and even fixing a Sweet 16 dress that came in with a salsa stain and left with an embroidered flower that hid it as if it had always been part of the design. I was mending myself too. Therapy on Tuesdays, walks at dawn, church some mornings, and coffee with the neighbors at the market. I wasn't looking to belong. I belonged to myself. One ordinary afternoon, there was a knock. It was Emily. She didn't bring war. She brought dark circles, yes, but also open hands. They asked me in therapy to make amends. So I came. She entered. I made tea. She spoke with slumped shoulders, which for her was the clearest sign of surrender. I was unfair. For years I demanded you love me in the way I imagined love should be, that you always rescue me. When I saw you standing on your own 2 feet, I hated you. And when the money came, I clung to the idea that, finally, you would need me. I didn't need you. I wanted to punish you. I don't know how to apologize without feeling like I'm losing something. But today I want to lose the thing that's killing me. I didn't hug her. I took her hands calmly. I'm not giving you forgiveness because you deserve it, honey. I'm giving it because I need to. And I'm giving it with conditions, respect, boundaries, truth. I can do that. And one more. Don't use Sophie to control me. Sophie is not our rope. She is our child. She finally cried, not as a victim, but as an adult. We both cried, without theatrics. That night she stayed over on the couch with Sophie, who arrived later, watching a silly movie. I made them popcorn. There were no speeches. There was peace. On Saturday, we had the opening for a small sewing corner the co-op offered me in their shop. We put up a sign. Susan's Stitches. The neighbors came, my co-workers from the co-op, Jessica with Sam and a bouquet of sunflowers, Emily with a small cake, and to my surprise, Aunt Charlotte with a box. Open it, honey. Inside was my mother-in-law's sewing machine, the one she gave me when I got married. I caressed it like a sleeping pet. That was always more yours than anyone's, Charlotte said. It was owed to you years ago. We laughed. Sometimes justice is late, but it arrives. A few days later, I received a notification. The deposit from the sale of the house. My share, clean, complete. Mr. Martinez called to confirm the closing. With that money, I paid for the South Pasadena apartment in cash and set up a fund with a simple name, Susan. Not for others' emergencies, not for just in case something happens to, not to rescue anyone, for me. To grow old with dignity, to not have to ask my children for permission, to buy myself flowers on a Tuesday, just because I feel like it. One Sunday, Jessica suggested a small dinner at my apartment. I said yes, with rules. She, Robert, and Sam arrived, and later Emily and Sophie with a Jell-O mold. We ate lasagna, laughed at old stories, and when the table was left with crumbs and half-empty glasses, Sam asked, "Grandma, can I do an interview for school? It's about the bravest person I know." Go ahead. What was harder, leaving the house or leaving the family? I watched the light come through the window, drawing a perfect rectangle on the floor. I answered slowly, to answer truthfully. The hardest part was leaving behind the version of myself that was convenient for everyone else. When you stop asking for permission to exist, it looks like you're leaving everything behind. But really, you're finally finding yourself. Robert squeezed Jessica's hand. Emily held my gaze without defiance. Sophie drew a picture of me on a piece of paper with a new hairstyle and a flowered apron. In the drawing, I had a big heart in the center. We taped it to the wall. As they were leaving, Emily paused at the door. "Mom," she hesitated, "could you come to Sophie's parent-teacher conference on Thursday? I want the teacher to meet my mom." I nodded. Not to rescue her, not to replace her, just to be there. And I am here. Not perfect, not a saint. I am here with my weathered hands that now make dresses and make a life. If you ever see me walking through the farmer's market with sunflowers and a box of pastries, don't say, "That poor woman." Say, "There goes a free woman." Because even though betrayal cut through me like a rusty knife, I learned to heal myself with a needle, thread, and truth. That night, after everyone had gone, I lit a small candle on the balcony, like my mother used to, not to ask for anything, but to be grateful for the table set inside of me. I made some iced tea, closed the curtains, and let the silence lie down beside me. I'm not running anymore. Whoever wants me in their life can walk alongside me. Life lesson. Sometimes the family you need begins with you. Set boundaries without guilt, call things by their name, and remember that dignity isn't pride. It's well-placed self-love. When you choose the truth and you choose yourself, you don't destroy anyone. You dismantle the lie that held you captive. Have you, or has someone you know, lived through a family betrayal that forced you to stand up and set boundaries? Answer that question in the comments with a brief, sincere sentence. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it today.